Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside with me today. Today we're going to take a look at outdoor arrows, specifically 3D arrows, whether it's a local tournament or something as big as a TAC event. Of course, with COVID, outdoor archery events have become huge the past few years, and particularly the TAC events in the spring and summertime. Now, there are some things to consider when building an arrow, either for your local 3D course, IBO, ASA, or TAC events. I'm going to try to cover a litany of different topics today in this video, and hopefully you can make the best choice of arrow for you. First things first, for actual organized 3D, that would be the IBO, or the International Bowhunter Organization, or the ASA, which is more common down in the southern portion. I'm here in Pennsylvania. We don't really have ASA events, but if you're actually in a sanctioned event like that, you need to be paying attention to the class that you want to shoot in. IBO is way more complicated than ASA in terms of the number of classes that could be represented at a 3D tournament. But basically, you have a bowhunter class, you have an unlimited class or an open class, and then you have both recurve, traditional, bare bow, and then of course you have the men's and women's sides. A lot of the regulations that go along with those events really dictates what kind of arrow you're going to be shooting. So for example, I shoot in the bowhunter class, which both for ASA and for IBO, normally the NFAA rules or the National Field Archery Association dictate that you can't have anything higher than a 23/64 diameter arrow. So that is the biggest I can go there. Whereas the open or unlimited class can have up to 27. And that's true for indoor shoots too. But when it comes to just local events at your local 3D shoot or TAC events where there are no rules, they're just pay, come and shoot for fun. It's kind of like playing around at golf with your buddies, which is kind of how I approach 3D anyway. So perhaps the number one question I do get is about TAC events, Total Archery Challenge. And of course, if you're unfamiliar with that, it is a challenge. You are shooting shots 70, 80, 90, 100, or over 100 yards on some of their courses. And of course, some of the courses are a little bit easier to shoot as well. Max distances of 40, 50, 60 yards. More indicative of what you'd see on your local ranges. But if you're going to go to a TAC event, you're going to go to a TAC event. You're going to be lobbing some arrows at some really big elk, caribou, Sasquatch sized targets, but in the triple digits when it comes to the yardage. There are three schools of thought, at least in my mind anyway. You have one, you just shoot the arrows you're already shooting. Most likely that's some type of hunting arrow anyway. 400 to 480 grains. That's pretty normal for a lot of people. Or you can then go and buy arrows that would be for your local 3D tournaments as well as for TAC, like this Gold Tip 22 that's here on the table. Or you can build an arrow that is super micro diameter, super wind cutting, use it for hunting, and use it for those long range TAC shots, but you're going to be spending more money. So there are pros and cons, of course, to all of them, but let's start with the most budget-friendly option, which is shooting the arrows that you currently have. So that would be something like this. This is a Sirius Supernova. Here we have a Victory V-Force, Gold Tip XT Hunter, depending on the spine that you would need to shoot for whatever bow setup you currently have. Because TAC events are not unknown yardage, there's no competition, it's just a challenge shoot. You can take a rangefinder, you have all the time in the world, and most of these arrows that are in that 400 to 480 grains from most people are pretty daggum flat shooting, about as flat shooting as you're going to get out of a 60 to 70 pound bow for most folks anyway. And so you already have them, half a dozen, you have 100, maybe 125 grain point, a stock insert. That's a pretty good arrow build. FOC is going to be pretty decent. You don't have to drop any other money, and if you do snap an arrow in half, which it's a pretty good chance you're going to at a TAC event, you're not at that much money and you don't have to go home sick about it. I myself strongly recommend this for people that just kind of want to recreationally shoot 3D at their local courses. It's just buy a standard diameter arrow, 244, 245, 246, depending on the manufacturer. Build it like a normal hunting arrow and have at it. Now, if you want to cut it a little short, shave off some extra weight, maybe you want to go with a really light pin knock system like I have on this Gold Tip here, or you want to go with some super lightweight points, 50, 75 grain instead of 100, 125, you're welcome to try it. The next option is getting a little bit more serious, and that is building an arrow that's going to snag some lines in an actual real-life 3D competition, whether it be just a locally sanctioned event or a real IBO ASA competition, as well as be light enough to take to a TAC event. Now, you're bumping up in price point, you're bumping up in components, you're going to have to be building some arrows yourself. That would be, for example, like this Gold Tip 22 series here. Again, I can't shoot anything larger than a 23 series, so a 22 series works out really well for me. Really light, low GPI. It's in the 7s, and that's at a 300 spine. So I get a really lightweight arrow. It's a little bit fatter. I'm able to cut some lines, and I get a really nice flat trajectory. However, it is significantly more expensive than just buying a dozen pre-fletched shafts that come from my local pro shop, of the Sirius, the Victory, the Gold Tip. You get it. these have to be built from scratch. They just ship as the shaft, so you have to buy the knock bushings, you have to buy inserts in this case, or glue in points, fletch them yourself, or have your local shop do them. It's significantly more work and significantly more money. Now, I do shoot local 3D as well as some IBO style sanctioned events, so I do like to cut and snag a few lines every now and then, and so I would have no problems building this arrow, spending a little extra money, and taking it to a TAC event as well. Another option is finding a standard diameter arrow, or a little bit smaller than standard diameter, but is really light in GPI. So for example, this Easton Bloodline right here, this 400 spine as it sits is 7.7 grains per inch. It's not super light compared to this 22 series, which is in that same ballpark of GPI, but it's going to be significantly less expensive. Not to mention, you can then eventually take it into the woods and go hunting. They come pre-fletched from the factory. There's a lot of win-wins here. Now, the Bloodline itself is not made by Easton anymore, but there are a lot of different comparable shafts that are currently on the market. So the last and most expensive and probably time-consuming option is finding like a 166 or a 204 diameter arrow here that's very light in GPI. This is the Sirius Orion, but other options like the Victory VAP and the Gold Tip Pierce exist as well. When you start buying micro diameter shafts like this and that 166 and 204, you're definitely going to go up in price point, and you kind of have to shop around and find one that has a low enough GPI. The Orion definitely has a low enough GPI, but it's by far the most expensive 166 currently offered on the market. It does have really strong components. You can really modulize this arrow, if that's even a word. You could really have a lot of modularity with this arrow and really build it out the way you want it to be, and it would make a fantastic hunting shaft. However, my biggest qualm with taking a 166 onto a 3D course is that 99% of the time they're going to have some sort of footer system, and if you get into a really stiff foam target, you're going to have a pain in the butt trying to get a footer system out of that 3D target, and particularly if it's a closer shot and you're getting pretty decent penetration. So as much as we do like that extra penetration when it comes to actually hitting a real life critter, I don't really like taking a footed shaft, a 166 or a collared shaft, into the 3D range, and particularly if it's in a situation where I'm going to probably be losing and snapping arrows because I'm going to be lobbing them at 120 yards. Lastly, there's some other options not represented here on the table. The Gold Tip Velocity or Ultralight is an excellent option that's also lower in GPI, and you can still build it out to be a hunting arrow as well. Carbon Express makes some lighter options, and so does Easton with their Flatline and their Lightspeed. All those are great lighter standard diameter options that I would strongly recommend if you do want to invest money in something that could cross over to the woods as well as to the 3D or the TAC course. Those are solid options. The last thing I didn't touch on, but I will here, as you can see, all of these arrows are fletched exactly the same. They're just fletched with the standard 2-inch blazer vein. Now, this is where it gets a very matter of personal preference and what you want to fletch with. Do you want to do 3 fletch? Do you want to do 4 fletch? Do you want to do a short profile vein, high profile vein like this, or do you want to do a longer, lower profile vein like an AAE style with their hybrids? You can do anything that you want on the back end. Just you have to remember that you're trying to reduce the amount of drag. So a lot of us, for our hunting shafts, if we're building them in our house, we're trying to put as much helical or offset on them as possible. How that fletch sits off or twisted around the shaft at an angle. That's going to really help, and particularly with fixed blade broadheads. But when you're trying to lob 70, 80, 100 yards with a lighter weight 3D carbon arrow, it's going to cause the parachute effect. And what that means is the back end with the fletchings is going to slow down sooner than the front end, which has all the weight. And so you'll get this paradox of looks like a parachuting effect. I shouldn't say it's a paradox, but it's a parachuting effect, and it will drastically suck energy out of your arrow, and you will drastically lose accuracy, efficiency, and you won't be able to cover the distances that you usually think you're able to. So what I strongly recommend is if you're going to buy an arrow, make sure it comes factory fletch, which is usually that 1 degree offset, 2 degree offset at the most. That's a very limited amount of spin. You're going to be actually able to get a pretty good amount of trajectory out of a standard factory bought arrow. Or if you're going to fletch them yourself, 1 degree, 2 degree, really be able to reach out to those distances. I wouldn't go anything stronger than 3. None of these here on the table are stronger than 3 degrees, and I really wouldn't trust them past 70, 80 yards before I saw that parachute effect coming into play. So that's all for this video. I know it still might leave you with a lot of questions about building a 3D outdoor TAC style arrow, and that's totally fine. Please do follow the links in the description below and ask me those questions. Facebook and Instagram, Average Jack Archery. Send me an email, averagejackarchery@gmail.com, or even drop a comment here on YouTube for everybody to respond to. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation, and we'll get to see you next time.